Okay, so today's question is: are crunches and sit-ups worth it? Short answer: no. So, do you want to elaborate on why? Yeah, for like 99% of people.
Yeah.
So
the issue with like crunches and sit-ups is, I know the logic there is like, oh, flex the muscle, make the muscle bigger. That isn't always the case. A lot, like what you should ideally be doing is using muscles in the way that they're like most intended in your body. So the core is intended to protect your spine and to keep it stable and to keep it from overbending or overextending or snapping in half. So it makes more sense to use those muscles the way they're meant to be used. So that's one part of it. The other issue that comes with mostly crunches, sit-ups, it kind of depends on how strong your core is. Like for some people, their core is strong enough that sit-ups are okay. So crunches specifically, it causes your vertebra to like open and close and like flex and extend. And what happens when you do that is as it opens, the disc that's in the middle gets pushed out, and then when it closes, a lot of times it doesn't come all the way back in as fast as you're doing it. Like if you're doing it very slowly, maybe it would be okay, but as fast as it's flexing and bending, that disc gets pushed out over time. And studies do show that there is a connection between excessive crunches or flexion extension at the spine and bulging and herniated discs and like the increase of that happening. So, and
that's just body weight, let alone if you do add weight to it. Like a popular one is like get the rope on each side of your head and do these. Mm-hmm. That's just going to amplify it to the whatever power. And then same with like there's like a seated weighted crunch machine that's going to make it way more likely as well. So really discourage those variations. Now you can do kind of like an anti-crunch, or like what I like to do is separate. Like usually when someone says sit-ups, they mean crunches. I kind of like to separate the two.
Yeah,
like crunches are like when you are doing like what you think of as a crunch or a sit-up, you're rounded and you're doing that repetitive rounding. Whereas a sit-up, or at least how I kind of refer to it in my terminology, is if you can keep a neutral spine and then come up within your range of motion, not come up too far to where you're bent into your lumbar, but just exist to where you're bending at the hips, then you're still getting all that action in your core without that repetitive flexion of the spine. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. It's actually going to train your core and your abs more effectively.
Because it's technically a stabilizer. Like if you do a sit-up correctly, that is a core stabilizer movement. It's like be stable even when flexing at the hips.
Yeah. So that is kind of one way you can still do sit-ups, quote unquote, but crunch is pretty much a no-go unless the only example is like you said, if you're a combat fighter, that it can be justified and it makes total sense, but that is, again, like 1%, probably less than 1% of people. So, like, in a just kind of average Joe, which is most of us, I'd lump us into that too. Like, you don't need it because it's not accomplishing something you can't accomplish by doing planks, anti-rotation press, any kind of isometric core work, so on. Like, there's a bunch of anything rotational done the right way, not over twisting into the lumbar. So there's so many core exercises out there that don't have to compromise your spine, and are actually going to train your abs more effectively. So.
Would you also argue, because like combat sports are the obvious, like they need to do crunches because they need to brace in that direction. Would you also argue that like general high contact sports like football, it would make sense? But football is different because that's a lot on the spine. So I don't know. What would you think? On football specifically.
But still football, you don't want to be, like, you want to have, like, your head, you don't want to tackle with your head down because you're...
Right. So you're not bracing the same way.
Your spine isn't stabilized.
Yeah.
No. Like, you want to be in a neutral spine. Like, when there's contact, you want a neutral spine.
So sit-ups
when you make contact.
Makes sense for football players should be doing sit-ups. Fighters.
No, I was arguing against it. Oh, sorry, sit-ups.
Not sit-ups, not crunches.
Yeah.
Football players.
If you have, like, I don't even bother with, like, if someone's like, I really love sit-ups, can I do them? I was like, all right, but I'm going to teach you how to not round at your back or do a crunch, quote unquote. So I make the distinction. But there's, like I said, there's so many different ab exercises out there. Just like, I don't think that you really need it. But there's a way you can do, like, that's why I make the distinction between there's crunches and then there's sit-ups. You can do sit-ups the right way. You can still do, like, sit-ups and do it the wrong way too. But, If someone just really enjoys that, then it's like, okay, let me show you how to do it the right way if you really need this and want to do that.
The other thing is that, like, to do a sit-up correctly is a very hard exercise. Like, you have to have a very strong core to be able to do it and keep your spine rigid. So it is not like a beginner exercise, though it is thrown in. It is like, at the very least, high intermediate. So sit-ups are not something that is like that everyone's gonna be able to do correctly.
Right.
So for a lot of people, if you're a beginner, they probably shouldn't appear in your program. Once you've like really built up your core, then you can progress to them. But like sit-ups and crunches for a beginner don't really make much sense. The closest thing to a crunch action that's relevant is like practicing dropping your rib cage so that your ribs aren't flared and your chest isn't lifted. And that you can do. You can do like rib drops, but that is only action at the thoracic. It still gives you that kind of little...
Yeah.
When I first started and I didn't know any better, I called them baby crunches because I would just have people like lay on the floor and only like lift and drop their ribs. And that feels very similar to a
Keep
crunch.
shoulder blades on the floor while you do it.
Well, shoulder blades stay on the floor, lumbar stays pressed, and you're just lifting and dropping. So you're still getting action at the part of your spine that's supposed to be mobile and training an important skill that's good for your...
And again, for any mouth breathers who want to argue in the comments, this is not as saying you can't round at the spine ever. Don't ever do it again. You're fear mongering.
Kind of place.
There's like just repetitive flexion at the spine, definitely under load, but even just body weight has heightened risk of injury. Asking to slip a disc eventually, if not now, later. It might not happen right away, but when it comes to like bending down to pick stuff up, moving, moving around. Yeah, your spine is meant to bend, but like you don't need to do under load or repetitively for the sake of training your abs. There are so many ab exercises out there, but you can really just stick to the simple stuff.
It's really like a risk reward kind of situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
So for like a combat fighter, it is risk reward, but for most people, it is the other way. So it doesn't make sense.
And even further to that, just to like put a pin in it, is like, I don't care about the risk, I want the reward. It's like, all right, well, it's also the lowest reward being delivered. Like crunches are not they're like one of the least effective like ways to train your abs. Like doing anything anti-rotation, anti-flexion, anti-extension, you can load those things and adding external resistance. That's how you build strength and how the best way to train a muscle. That's as simple as it gets. So
back to what
if you don't care about the risk and you want the most efficient thing, also there's an argument for that too.
Yeah, so. That was kind of what like at the beginning what I was saying of like the most efficient way to strengthen a muscle, see hypertrophy, do anything with any particular muscle in the body is to use it the way it's supposed to be used. And because the core is supposed to stabilize, you're going to get so much further with stability than flexion, because that's like, it can flex because your spine needs to bend, but that's not like its main job. So
I think that's it. So you don't need crunches.
No. Unless
like very small percent of people, maybe we'll do a follow-up video with like some replacements for
that'd be fun.
Crunches.
Yeah, because there's a lot more, and they're a lot more fun than just laying on the ground and torturing yourself.
Yeah.
So.